Good evening. Welcome to the Salem Area Mass Transit District Board of Directors meeting for January, and Happy New Year. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I'm noting for the record that we do have a quorum, and so we're able to proceed with business. And I've asked Director Holmstrom to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, General Manager Pollack, could you please lead us in the safety moment?
Yes, thank you. So the safety moment for this month, letting you aware that January is Blood Donor Month. On December 31st, 1969, President Nixon designated January as National Blood Donor Month. Since then, we've paid tribute to blood donors and encouraged people to give blood. Blood is always needed, with an average of 31,000 pints used every day. That means a person needs a blood product every 2 seconds. Blood and blood products are used to treat injuries as well as many diseases like cancer and other chronic diseases. If you're interested in donating, you can go to redcrossblood.org to find a local center, but our actual center here in Salem is at 1860 Hawthorne Ave. And if you have never donated blood, I would encourage you to do so. It's very rewarding. And if you've been banned from donating due to excessive time spent in certain European countries, that ban has been lifted a couple of months ago, and you're eligible to donate again. And so with that, I conclude my safety message.
Great, thank you. Next, I'd like to note that prior to this meeting, the board met in executive session, and we discussed two matters. The first was in relation to ORS 192.6602H, and the board received a briefing from legal counsel as it relates to current litigation, and we have nothing to report in this meeting. And then the second matter related to ORS 192.6602B. And the board was briefed on the results of an Oregon Government Ethics Commission complaint filed on General Manager Pollack. The board discussed the matter and the final stipulated order issued by the commission. And so I would entertain a motion from a board member to take action on that item. Please.
Thank you, President Davidson. I'd like to move that the board has determined no additional action is warranted.
Okay. We have a motion here. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second from Director Carney. Motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing no discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, motion passes unanimously. Excellent. Next, we have a second reading and public hearing, and I believe I have to open the public hearing, so I will go ahead and do that. And this concerns the fair ordinance. General Manager Pollack, could you introduce it?
Sure. First, I'll ask Ted Stonecliffe, Senior Planner, to please come present the staff report.
Good evening, President Davidson and members of the board. I'm here tonight to ask you to open the second reading for our fair ordinance. As you know, staff completed a fares analysis that was presented to the board at the December 15th board meeting. The report starts on page 16 of your packet, and the proposed new fares listed on pages 10 and 11 in table 1 of the board packet, pages 2 and 3 of the ordinance, were developed for four major reasons. First, to make the Youth Zero Fare Payment Program permanent. Second, to prepare to launch the electronic fare payment system called UMO. Third, to prepare to unify the regional fares with Cherriots local fares when the UMO system launches in late spring or early summer. And finally, to prepare to establish a new $90 Lyft universal pass for UMO users. All comments received by the board and the public have been recorded and considered. One change that I want to direct your attention to for Table 1 is just a minor change, but addresses Director Duncan's comment at our last meeting. Apologize for not making that revision in the packet, but essentially, we need to strike the word cash whenever one ride is in the table for Cherriots Local, Cherriots Regional, and Route 1X fares, because that is not only the cash fare, that would be the fare for one ride using the UMO card as well. So at this time, I would like to, if I can get my script here. Sorry. Staff recommends that the board direct the second reading of ordinance 2023-01 by title and consider any received citizen testimony regarding proposed changes to the fare structure, rates, and effective date for transportation services pursuant to ORS 198.540 and ORS 267-150. I can take any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you. Before we move to board questions, I'd like to note for the record that we have received one piece of public comment from Frank Waters. That's included in our board packet that was emailed directly to us. So I just wanted to note that Mr. Waters' comments were taken into account. So, and any questions from board members? Okay, I've got one question while Director Carney considers. My question surrounds the price difference on the daily, what I'll call the day pass, the difference between the cash and the UMO price. I understand the 5 cent difference in the cash versus the UMO, either card or application, is I think a behavioral nudge to encourage them to do that because cash is inherently slower. It takes more time to, I know from personal experience, to get that 160 or 165, or no, 160 in there. Is this common in North American transit agencies that have adopted this? I wasn't familiar with it previously, though I don't often get in the weeds on North American transit fare structures. So.
Thank you, President Davidson. So you're referring to the difference between the $325 price for a cash day pass and the $3.20 price if you use the UMO card. Right. With the electronic fare, it's because we have a fare capping system, we could theoretically have a $325 price on there, but by having it at $320, we are saying 2 rides gets you capped at that daily rate. With the cash, it's easier for us to accept quarters than dimes and nickels, and it also gives, as you say, the incentive to use the UMO card rather than the cash option.
Okay, and is this common in other transit agencies?
There are cases where the prices are different for cash versus electronic, yes. I can't speak to the commonality,
Sure.
but I have seen it, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, please.
I think, well, when I look at the numbers, the increased numbers of ridership for Youth Zero, and I think about what we're trying to do in the community and what transit success looks like, I am led to wonder what a fare-free system overall would look like, and you know, what consideration, I mean, like, obviously, we've spent all this time getting this UMO into place, and that would just, like, negate any purpose of that, and maybe it isn't a today decision, but when I look at the stunning increases in ridership of youth since we introduced Youth Zero, you know, I kind of start to think about, like, what kind of, we do have our partnerships or potential partnerships with employers where they can get their employees to ride. But is there another way to think about that where we could just say, hey, everybody get on the bus? And create some kind of a different kind of business or city level partnership that would just take away a lot of what looks from the outside, like complexity to people that don't ride. Like, if I asked my next door neighbor, what does it cost to get on the bus? How much do you need to have? I'm 100% confident that with the 2 cars and a truck that they have in their driveway, they have no idea. And that's a barrier that prevents people from getting on the bus. As is when we looked at the long-term or the long-range transit plan data, the median household income in the city of Salem. Like, economics is also a barrier that prevents people from getting on the bus and from taking trips that might not be just essential, trips that might be social, trips that might be to a place that they might just enjoy being. So it's a thought that I've had kicking around through the long-range transit plan, and as long as we've been talking about this, and it might be difficult to accomplish, but I wanted to bring it up.
I'll jump into that. I love the discussion. It's one I've thought a lot about. And while this ordinance before us today, of course, doesn't allow for us to accommodate those kinds of changes, one change that I would like to see that is not necessarily the end goal that you're discussing, but I think addresses some of the barriers that you identified, is to expand the definition of what is presently our reduced fare. And so right now we have strict criteria of who qualifies for that, and I think moving forward, I think a further fare study and then a fare ordinance perhaps in this next year, we could take a look at expanding the populations that presently benefit from that. And so I know Director Navarro has talked about removing barriers for veterans as they get about transit. Perhaps they fall under a category of a reduced fare. There are many other individuals. Right now we don't have I think we could be a little more expansive in the socioeconomic determinants on reduced fare. So I guess I would just like to say I'd love to continue this conversation, and perhaps further action at a future board meeting could lead us down to where we're looking at another ordinance. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, President Davidson. First of all, I'd like to thank Ted and staff. Good job. Thank you for putting this all together. I think the board has a lot to talk about in the future. Obviously, this is in front of us, and this is great. But I agree. Maybe not the specifics, but with some of my colleagues up here, that I think we should try at the board at some point to take a larger look at fare policy moving in the future, especially as we move into towards 2026, when revenue picture might be changing. How does the fares work into that? I think the electronic fare payment system is a fantastic tool that's going to be give us a lot more flexibility and ability to do some different things. So looking forward to that. I do have one kind of specific question about that. Maybe this has already been answered, and I apologize, but it wasn't clear to me. Will the electronic fare payment system provide either initially or in the future for an open fare payment system where you use contactless, either Apple Pay or something like that, or a card that's not an UMO card or app?
Thank you for that question, Director Holmstrom. Yes, at the launch of UMO, we will not have the ability to accept open payments, but it is a capability that Cubic, the company behind UMO, is working on, and I believe they have actually launched it in London and some of the bigger markets like that. But so it shouldn't be very long before we have that capability. If I could just answer or take a stab at the questions or comments that Directors Carney and Davidson made regarding a fareless system. Certainly you have to weigh the consequences of how much service would you be able to put on the street with that fare income. But as Director Holmstrom infers, with the additional income that could be coming in 2026, we could take a look at supplementing or backfilling fares in a certain way. City of Wilsonville and City of Corvallis are good examples for fareless systems. Both of those are funded through different programs. Wilsonville is funded through their businesses, and then City of Corvallis is a water bill fee that is paying for their transit system. So even though their systems are free to the customer, people are still paying for it. So we would need to, in my opinion, we would need to consider that as well.
I'll add one other thing, which is, and I'm probably getting the reports wrong again, but I believe in both our long-range transit plan and then our needs analysis, riders, when surveyed, indicated that the thing that they wanted most was increased service, both in frequency and availability. And so I think it's important to note that those that rely on our system when weighing something, including reduced fares, still said service frequency and availability was higher. So. Okay, other questions? Okay, so I will go ahead and I will invite public comment. So if there are members of the public that would like to provide comment either in person or virtually, I would invite you to please introduce yourself. And I should specify that this is public comment for the fare ordinance that we are deliberating right now. There will be an opportunity for public comment more generally in a few minutes. Okay, I'm not seeing any members of the public stepping up. I do want to again note for the record that Frank Waters has submitted written testimony. And so with that, if there's no further questions for Mr. Stonecliffe, we will go ahead and proceed with a motion if someone would like to make one. And this, okay.
Okay. I think I have it right. It's a big long one.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Okay. I move that the board direct the second reading of ordinance 2023-01 by title and consider any received citizen testimony regarding proposed changes to the fare structure, rates, and effective date for transportation services pursuant to ORS 198540 and ORS 267150. This is the second reading of ordinance number 2023-01 by title, ordinance number 2023-0. Do I have to read all that?
No.
Okay. Can I get a second?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? I'd just like to say thank you very much for all of the work to this. I, as usual, found the report very interesting. I'm amazed that it had to be that comprehensive, but I appreciate the comprehensive nature of it, so thank you. Okay, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay.
Now you have to read that piece.
I'll say motion passes unanimously.
All right. This is the second reading of ordinance number 2023-01 by title, ordinance number 2023-01, repealing ordinance number 2019-01 and establishing SAMTD fare categories and rates and establishing an effective date.
And now we need a second?
No.
Oh, no, okay,
There's no motion there.
great. Well, that concludes our second reading and public hearing for the adoption of the new fare ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we will open public comment, and this is public comment for the general January board meeting. I'd like to note that we have received electronic public comment. from Miss Lindsay? Betsy Spain. And I've asked staff to brief the board on the issues identified in that public comment at a future work session. So thank you for that public comment, and I'd invite other members of the public to, if they would like to provide public comment now. Okay, seeing no public comment, we'll go ahead and proceed to the consent calendar. Unless there's any issues, would someone like to make a motion?
Move to approve the consent calendar?
Okay, we have a motion to approve the consent calendar. Is there a second?
I second.
We have Director Duncan with the second. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, motion passes unanimously. We'll go ahead and proceed to the action items, the first of which is the election of a board secretary. So at this point, I'd like to state that, as all of you are aware, Director Nguyen resigned her membership from this body in our November board meeting. And so we presently have a vacancy in the position of board secretary. And so now we will be doing a nomination. So if someone would like to make a nomination to fulfill the position of board secretary, I would now entertain a motion.
I'd like to nominate Director Duncan as secretary.
Okay, we have a nomination for Director Duncan as board secretary. Are there any other motions?
Any other nominations?
Yes, any other nominations? Thank you. Okay, seeing no further nominations, would someone like to second the nomination to appoint Director Duncan as board secretary?
I'd like to second the
Okay.
nomination.
We have a nomination and a second.
Now we need a motion to appoint, to elect.
Oh, thank you, yes. Okay, would someone like to make a motion to appoint Director Duncan?
Elect.
Elect, we are electing. Verbs are difficult.
It's been 2 years.
It has.
I'd like to make a motion to elect Director Duncan to the position of secretary.
Okay. Would you like to make another?
I would like to second that.
Okay, we have seconds on nominations and motions. I believe we have dotted i's, crossed t's. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion. All those in favor of the election, please say aye.
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 I will abstain. Thank you.
Okay, we have a mostly unanimous. We have 4 ayes and 1 abstention. Congratulations, Director Duncan, on being the new board secretary.
Thank you so much.
Next, I'll invite General Manager Pollock to introduce the next agenda item.
Great, thank you. So before you tonight is a proposal to adopt the 2023 federal and state legislative agenda. So the board annually adopts this legislative agenda to set direction for legislative activities. We use this agenda as a guide when responding to legislative matters and as a communication tool with our legislators and other interested parties. On January 11th, the board's legislative subcommittee met to develop the proposed legislative agenda that's in front of you this evening with staff and representatives of CFM advocates, our legislative consultants. The proposed agendas are included in attachment A and B respectively. And the district's proposed agendas identify legislative priorities and projects for annual appropriations and grant opportunities. We have this evening representatives of both the federal and state bodies of CFM to present the agendas, and upon conclusion of the agenda, we will, the legislative committee will recommend that the board adopt the agendas as shown. So we'll start with the federal legislative agenda first, and we have Kirby Garrett from the federal office, who's here virtually, there he is, to present the agenda. So Kirby, it's all yours.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Alan. Bear with me while I share my screen here. Okay, is that coming up all right on your end?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you, President Davidson, fellow board members. Again, my name is Kirby Garrett. I'm the Senior Vice President of Federal Affairs for CFM Advocates. We have the honor and privilege of representing Salem Area Mass Transit District in Washington, D.C. as your federal, your eyes and ears and voice back here in Washington, D.C. And I'm actually doing this presentation from the East Coast, but down here in Florida, taking a quick aside from a vacation this week. So I apologize for not being in more formal attire, but could only fit so much in the suitcase. But anyways, I will go ahead and dive in here. As Alan mentioned, happy to present the 2023 federal legislative agenda that we have worked with your team to develop, which outlines your federal projects and priorities that we will be working on to advance this year. And we are really excited about the agenda that we've put together this year and also the success that we've had, not only in the past year, but in the years leading up to it. So real quick, I know you all have a lot on the agenda tonight, so I will try not to do the typical DC thing and filibuster. We'll try to keep things relatively concise here, but wanted to go over our recent successes again over the last year and some of the previous years leading up to it. Give a quick reminder of kind of the federal infrastructure funding environment that we're operating under. As you all know, it's a pretty historic time with passage of the infrastructure bill and most recently the Inflation Reduction Act. And then we'll dive into the federal agenda, walk through those projects, and then give kind of a very quick recap of what happened at the federal level in the 2022 midterm elections, and then kind of pull out the crystal ball and see what we are imagining for the year ahead. It's going to be a pretty interesting Congress here over the next 2 years. So without further ado, so this is a really, really fun slide. I've been looking forward to presenting this one all day. We are absolutely thrilled with the success that we've been able to have with your team. So last year in 2022, we were able to secure $2.6 million for the South Salem Mobility as a Service Transit Facility Project. We were able to secure this through the annual appropriations bill that Congress passes each year. So if you remember the headlines, right before Christmas Eve, Congress was able to finally get out the door a 4,000 plus page omnibus bill funding the entire government, plus a lot of other things. Our item here for 2.6 million was included as one line in that 4,000 plus page bill. So anyways, really excited to secure this funding. This is a really competitive pot of money. They limit this to about 1% of the total appropriations for the year. So there's only so many awards that they provide. And plus, this is building upon our success that we also had through this process last year. So if we go further down to the next couple lines, so we were able to secure 5 zero-emission buses through the Low-No grant program for $6.3 million. But we were also able to secure, as you know, $6.3 million for zero-emission buses through the CDS process. So again, they call this congressionally directed spending. This is what was formerly known as earmarks. So they've kind of been brought back on a very limited scale under a new name. So anyways, to get 2 CDS awards back to back is just really, really exciting. And I'll also just remind you, because Salem should be incredibly proud of this, as are we. 6.3 million is, as Senator Merkley likes to tout, probably the largest earmark or CDS item of its kind to ever be secured in the state of Oregon. So that's just spectacular, and one we're very, very proud of as you all take that step to transition your fleet towards electric. So anyways, put that all together. I won't go through each and every one of these awards, but as you can see, working with your team to outline your projects, identify the opportunities at the federal level, and put in these grants applications and CDS applications and do the advocacy work for that. All told, we've been able to secure $22.4 million going back to 2018. As you can see, basically an award, at least one award every year. And what that comes out to is about a 55-to-1 return on your investment for every dollar that you're putting towards our services. I would be completely remiss if I didn't again mention the superb work and effort of your team, Alan's leadership, and everyone else that's a part of these grant applications and CDS projects. It is truly a team effort to put together quality projects like this, get all the information together, and put those in. So a huge thank you to them for all of their work, and to you all for your leadership of these efforts. And then just at the bottom, obviously we can't take complete credit for this, but we have been advocating kind of during the COVID years for funding through the legislative vehicles that we're moving for COVID relief, the American Rescue Plan, the initial CARES Act, and CARES Act 2, which Salem Transit was able to secure quite a bit of funding through. So, as a reminder, just on the infrastructure funding arena that we're working in, as you know, at the end of November 2021, Congress passed a historic infrastructure funding bill that provided 5 years of funding for all kinds of infrastructure, but primarily transportation, $1.2 trillion in total. A lot of that is going towards, or a significant part of that is going towards bus transit. And that's something, through also not only representing Salem Transit, but also the Bus Coalition, we work to advocate for those increases in bus funding. So you can see bus and bus facility funding was significantly plussed up through that process. So there is 5 years of guaranteed, historic levels of bus and bus facility funding. A lot of that also went towards the low and no emission program, which we are targeting for your zero emission buses. This kind of puts it in perspective in a more visually appealing way than the last table, but it just shows you kind of how much bus funding was increased through the infrastructure bill. We've been working since MAP 21 through the FAST Act to get it increased and get bus funding up to where it used to be prior to the historic cuts that we suffered under MAP 21. As you can see, we made some progress. This is in the authorized infrastructure transportation funding legislation. This dotted line is additional funding we were able to secure through the annual appropriations increases, which I'll get to in a second. But all goes to show just how much funding there is available right now, which is a very good thing because of the cost escalations we're seeing and the demand for transit agencies as they all nationwide try to take that step towards zero emission technology. There is historic demand as well. So that kind of brings us to the 2023 federal agenda. So there were a couple items that we were not successful in securing, which when you look at the list of everything that you all have been able to secure at the federal level, it kind of comes as not too much of a surprise. So with FTA's two primary competitive grant programs that they provide grants for bus transit systems, the bus and bus facility program and the low and zero emission program. They're, again, historic levels of funding, but historic demand as well. There was about $7.8 billion in funding requested for $1.6 billion available this year. So there's a lot of grant applications that FTA is receiving that are still exceeding the resources they have available. So we put applications in for both zero emission buses last year and additional funding for South Salem Transit Facility. Both of those, we did a debrief with the FTA to learn more about those applications and see how we could position those better in this year's upcoming applications. And it was a little frustrating because we went through the debrief, and by the end of it, my primary question was, well, what could we have done better? Where could we have actually improved that application? And they said, yeah, that's a fair question, because there's really not much that the reviewer saw in the application to change things. They noted, kind of with a wink and a nod, that they have an obligation to meet geographic diversity requirements and make awards to different transit agencies. Technically, they don't have to do that from year to year, but they definitely do. So anyways, they highly encourage us to pursue this again this year. Both programs will be opening up imminently, any day. FTA has a statutory obligation to open up both the low or no emission grant program, which we'll be putting forward the zero emission buses to, and the bus and bus facility program, which we'll be putting the facility towards. So those will be opening up any day now, and we'll be making these requests. The only kind of small tweak that we heard from them was to look at, we talked a lot about how our applications would support the existing workforce in the area and within your organization. They said maybe think a little bit about job creation, but that was kind of the only idea they had. So anyways, we'll be putting in that application as well and pursuing additional CDS funding as well for the zero emission buses. So after that, on the policy front, so we'll also be working with the Bus Coalition to advocate for additional plus-up dollars for the bus and bus facility funding. So as a reminder, the infrastructure bill, as I mentioned, authorizes funding levels for the bus and bus facility program and low and no emission program for the next 5 years. Plus-up funding is additional money that Congress has the ability to put towards different programs through the annual appropriations bills when they're funding the government each year. So we've had a lot of success, going back to that other chart, in securing that funding for the bus and bus facility programs. The environment we're working in right now is a little trickier because we've kind of been victims of our own success, and we've achieved so much through the infrastructure bill. And we're also in kind of a political climate right now where securing significant increases in funding each year is definitely going to be harder. I'll get to that on the next slide, but there's obviously going to be a lot of conversations about the debt limit, and there's, again, just not quite the same appetite in both chambers of Congress to increase funding. So anyways, we'll still be making the effort to secure what we're asking for is a plus up of about $400 million. Last year, we were able to secure $140 million in additional funding for the program. So anyways, we'll be advocating for that through your members of Congress who their input, their engagement and asks to the Appropriations Committee is key to securing these increases. And obviously more funding for the programs we're targeting means a higher chance of success for your projects. The other policy item that we're putting forward is the alternative fuels tax credit extension. This has been one that has been on here for a while, and we've had success working with other interested parties nationwide to continue to get 1 or 2 year extensions of this program. We're in this terrible cycle where Congress usually lets it expire and then they'll pass a retroactive extension, and it's just kind of is not very good at actually incentivizing the use of this tax credit and use of alternative fuels. But finally, the Inflation Reduction Act was actually able to extend the tax credit for 3 years through the end of 2024. However, as we've seen, it continues to expire, and Congress is delayed in taking action. So we'll be continuing to take our advocacy on the Hill to passing a permanent extension of the alternative fuels tax credit, so we're not reliant on Congress addressing this each year. So with that, I'll take a quick pause just in case you have any questions on these 4 items at this time.
Any questions?
None.
Nope. No questions.
Okay. Okay. So I'll move on here. Final slide. So just election review and kind of preview of the year ahead. So as you may have heard, we had an election in the fall, and it was a pretty interesting result. So Democrats retained a narrow majority in the Senate and actually expanded it by 1 seat. As you recall, it was tied 50-50 in a historic breakdown of the Senate chamber, and was reliant on the vice president to cast tie-breaking votes on a routine basis. So now Democrats have 1 additional vote. They won't be as reliant on using that tiebreaker vote or using Senator Manchin or Senator Sinema as kind of those lone wolf independent votes. They'll have a little bit more of a buffer, which actually provides makes quite a bit of difference. On the House side, Republicans captured the majority, but not nearly with the margin they were expecting. So they have about a 4-seat majority in the House, which means so they can lose 4 seats on every vote. But 1 more vote, and they obviously will lose the vote. So that makes governing, as we saw at the beginning of the year, extremely difficult to do even pretty routine things. So what is interesting is that 4-seat majority could get even more slim here in the next couple of months. I'm sure you've probably seen the headlines about George Santos from New York, who is receiving a lot of pressure to resign his seat. In addition, there are some members, one specifically, Vern Buchanan, who is not very happy about the way the speakership election went. He thought he was wrongfully passed over for the Ways and Means Committee chairmanship, and there's been a lot of discussion about whether he's going to resign. And then beyond that, you never know what's going to happen with different members of Congress. And so that 4-seat majority could easily shrink even further, making it even more difficult to govern. So I'll get to kind of some more of what that means in a second, but just looking back at Oregon real quick. So Senator Wyden secured his 5th term, easily secured re-election, and it's kind of a historic era right now in Oregon politics where we have 2 brand new members of Congress representing the Salem transit area. So Representative Andrea Salinas will be representing the new 6th congressional district, including the Salem area. And then Congresswoman Lori Chavez-DeRemer will be representing kind of the outskirts of your service area, the 5th congressional district, which now goes all the way from Bend up to South Portland. So we have already been working with them to establish those relationships. Fortunately, we knew them and some of their staffs before they even took office, and have been working to convey to them, obviously, the importance of your service and make sure they're familiar with all of the great work that you do. And so we'll be working with them and kind of some fresh faces to advocate for your priorities. So 2023 outlook, again, Senator Wyden secured another term, and Senator Merkley continues to rise through the Appropriations Committee. So he's still on that committee, is gaining more and more seniority, and is critically in the majority in the Senate. Senator Wyden continues to chair the Senate Finance Committee, which is one of, many would argue, the most powerful committee in the Senate. So real quick, going back to what the tight margins in Senate and House majorities mean. So I think the overarching outlook is to expect the bare minimum to get done. So there's 2 essential items that Congress needs to tackle this year. That is raise the debt limit, which we've already hit the ceiling, but they're using extraordinary measures, which will push that back to about June. So they're going to have to find a way to raise that. President Biden has said he's not going to negotiate on it. Republicans have said they're not going to take any action to raise it until they have some type of guarantees and compromise on reducing spending going forward. So at some point, something's going to have to break on that, because there would be catastrophic consequences if the debt ceiling is not addressed. The other fundamental thing that Congress has to tackle this year is fund the government. And the omnibus bill that I mentioned earlier is going to expire at the end of September. And Congress at some point has to pass legislation to either extend that or pass a full year appropriations bill. So they have, as part of the speakership drama and election of Speaker McCarthy, House Republicans committed to keeping funding at the levels capped in FY 2022, so 2 years ago, which would mean cutting funding from existing levels. That's not going to fly with Senate Democrats, as you might imagine. And House Republicans also committed to passing the appropriations bills separately. So there's 12 separate bills that fund the government. And it's really, really difficult, especially with a majority so thin, to pass each of those bills individually with the votes you need. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see how that all plays out. It will be another fascinating episode of real life House of Cards, and we will all be really interested to see how that plays out. But obviously, we will be doing our work to advocate for the priorities I mentioned on the federal agenda, and making sure that your projects are hopefully included within whatever appropriations bills are moving out of the House and Senate. Looming over all of this will be the 2024 election, the presidential campaign, which of course, doesn't do any favors to helping both sides meet in the middle and find common ground to advance legislation. So beyond those basic functions, we can expect a lot of oversight hearings in the House, and the Senate will be working at a breakneck pace to confirm as many judges and executive agency nominees as they can. So if that's kind of doom and gloom outlook, there will be a lot of opportunities for us in the year ahead. But we are really excited about your federal agenda. Again, the success we've had, and are excited to continue working off of that to secure even more of your federal taxpayer dollars back there to Salem. So with that, I will pause and happy to take any questions that you might have.
Any questions? Go ahead.
I just want to say, having moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, and where my parents are currently in Florida, I know how late you're up and kind of still sounding coherent and thinking on your feet. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. We just finished packing, so I've got, the blood's flowing.
Okay, I don't see any further questions, Kirby. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I'll invite up Dale Penn, who's with CFM Advocates as well, but with our statewide work.
And I've also, thank you, I've also got Waylon Buchan, who's on our State Affairs team, and I was actually hoping that Kirby would stay up and listen to me for another, 20, 30 minutes, but apparently not, so.
How do you think I planned on going to sleep?
Oh, there you are, okay, great. Fantastic. So we have also a slide deck ready to go. Perfect, thank you. We can go ahead and skip ahead to the next one. Again, my name is Dale Penn. I'm the State Affairs Partner at CFM. And as Kirby mentioned, Waylon and I also have the honor of representing the interests of Cherriots at the Salem Capitol, which is under a heavy amount of construction right now. And this is the first time we've actually been able to be back in the building for a couple of years. So this is fantastic and semi-new experience for a lot of people. So this is the agenda that I wanted to talk about today. We wanted to provide a little bit of a primer on our State Affairs team, talk about the 2023 legislative session, some of the important timelines and dates and processes that we're working through, some of the major issues and tensions that we see in the building, topics that either directly or indirectly can impact transportation conversations. And then we want to discuss the 2023 state legislative agenda, which your legislative committee has discussed. We can go through all of the concepts there in greater detail. We put together also some bills that either, again, directly or indirectly can impact transit or transportation that we are closely monitoring. And then we want to also go over some of the new legislative faces and some of the new facts around the building and how that can impact some of the advocacy efforts that we are going to be pursuing. So if we can skip to the next slide, there we go. So this is our State Affairs team at CFM. We have 5 full-time lobbyists. We have a legal extern from Willamette, and we also have an intern from Willamette who's helping us this session. Both Waylon and I do the bulk of the work for Cherriots, and so you'll see us in the building pretty regularly. We have offices in here in Salem, and because we are back in the building, it's a fantastic opportunity if legislators are in this area to get some of the board to meet them as well. So we can go ahead and skip to the next one. So the 2023 legislative session, lawmakers, lobbyists, members of the public, all of us returned to the Capitol this past week to start the 2023 legislative session. It is during the odd-numbered years, which 2023 is one of those, we have a long session, which is a 160-day maximum where it starts January 17th, and that 160 days can go to June 25th. We can adjourn early, but that doesn't always happen. There's a lot of discussion, horse trading, and budget debates that happen towards the last month of session that can really stretch that out. One of the next big dates that's very important is February 1st. Traditionally, governors will release ahead of a long session their governor's recommended budget in the around December 1st or right around that time before a legislative session. But because we had an election and a brand new governor, they're going to be releasing, Governor Kotek is going to be releasing her budget on February 1st. And that starts the long 4 or 5 month process of budget discussions with the legislature. And that is the kind of the starting pace. Legislators then take a look at that and make decisions whether or not to, what they want to keep, what they want to toss out, and then proceed forward. So early days of a legislative session are often kind of dedicated to briefings and updates to ensure kind of the incoming and returning lawmakers have all the information and relevant background details that they need to do their job. We have 38 new legislators who have not been in the building or have only been in the building since the pandemic. 38 out of 90. That's a huge chunk. And as you can imagine, each one of them brings unique perspectives, insight, education, awareness about certain issues to the building. None of them is a expert on everything. And so there's going to need to be a lot of education on transit and transportation for those legislators. Very few legislators who were around for the 2017 package, the transportation package, are still there. Those who are diamonds in the rough, and we need to continue to meet with them and educate them so that they can help their legislators or other fellow legislators who are new to understand what went on there, the fact that we passed a historic dedicated transit funding source during that period, and we need to continue to protect that. Some of the major issues that we see this year include houselessness and housing, behavioral health, discussions around the I-5 bridge up in the Portland area, tolling, the semiconductor industry investments. There's going to be quite a bit of discussion around how do we in Oregon take advantage of the CHIPS Act and how do we invest more in that vital industry. And then also, as I mentioned, the umbrella of the Capitol renovation hangs over everything. If you've been in the building before, and many of you probably have, you've been under the rotunda, you've been to the meeting areas outside of the chambers. All of that is closed off to the public. Right now, it's just that main hallway outside of the hearings and then the member offices. So you can imagine how challenging that can be to considering how much room we had to how much we have now. And construction noise is constant. During hearings, if you listen on OLIS, the Oregon Legislative Information System, you can often hear jackhammering or hammers or saws or whatnot in the background. It's going to be part of the legislative record for all time. So it can sometimes be a distracting measure when you're discussing something very sensitive, and then to have that kind of noise. So it's a different environment, but we are back in person, and that's fantastic. We had 1,900 bills introduced last week, and we expect several hundred more. So it's quite a bit to go through. And we've gone through that first bucket of bills. We've worked with General Manager Pollock and your teams to identify ones that directly impact transit, and that's what we want to talk about a little bit more here. So this next slide is our state legislative agenda. This is split up into different priority levels, level 1, 2, 3. Level 1 is the highest priority level as you could imagine. This is one that we were going to directly advocate on as issues pop up. The most important thing that we have on here, and we have this on here every year, is around preserving, maintaining, and enhancing the public transportation investments, particularly those from House Bill 2017, from the 2017 session. This is the STIF money that has helped provide operational support and funding for you and all the other transit entities around the state, dedicated funding, which we have never had before in the state of Oregon. Protecting that is our number one priority because there's always an interest when there's a pot of money in the legislature to say, well, maybe I can take a little bit of that and use it over here. And we've had that already happen before even the first dollar came out of that pot. So we always have to maintain that. We also want to check and monitor any discussions around zero-emission vehicles. As Kirby and the federal team have indicated, your future is in low-emission or electric vehicles, and we want to make sure if there are any opportunities, either from a policy or a budget standpoint, where we can chime in and educate lawmakers and try to direct some of that spending appropriately, is helpful. We also want to make sure that we support any and all investments around footpaths and bicycle trails as a robust continuum of transit and transportation systems is necessary. And then we have several other bills. House Bill 2777, and I realize there's a typo there. House Bill 2777 is an issue related to public transit and surcharges on parking violations and other things around the city. This is an issue we're going to be tracking. It's introduced, I think, by Representative Evans. It's going to be something we're going to be tracking very closely. I-5 bridge replacement, as I mentioned, that's a huge conversation directly impacting transportation. TNC legislation, transportation network companies. These companies like Uber and Lyft, we often see 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of legislation each year around those, how they can operate, their regulations and whatnot. So we're going to be tracking that very closely. Tolling, I already mentioned, that's a huge component for transportation. And then the NEMT legislative concept, that's non-emergency medical transportation. That's actually House Bill 2845 that has been introduced now. When we created the state legislative agenda, that had not been identified yet. But that's one we're going to be tracking very closely. The non-emergency medical transportation issue, traditionally provided by the coordinated care organizations, the CCOs around Oregon, how those entities manage the transportation for senior people with disabilities and others. There's been some concern around how that's provided, and there's going to, I think, be a robust discussion around that. That is led by Senator Deb Patterson, who is your senator or senator of a component of the service area that you have. So I want to stop there and take a moment and see if anyone has questions on any of the 2023 state legislative agenda items.
Director Navarro.
Thank you, President Davidson. So the question that I had is, could you repeat the bill for the non-emergency medical transportation?
Yes, 2845, House Bill 2845.
Awesome. And then, so just this morning, we had received a email about House Bill 2662, and that's asking for support of a commuter rail that would come to Salem, and it would be stopping in Woodburn and Kaiser. I believe, I mean, I'm not sure because they're still investigating it, but I think that would include the Kaiser Transit Center. So my question is, where would that lie on our priorities, or is this something that we haven't made a priority?
So thank you for the question, Director Navarro. That is an issue that popped up after we had developed our legislative agenda. And so that one is one, I think, under discussion in the board today. And the good thing about this legislative agenda process that we have is that it allows us some flexibility to pivot, because we never know going into session all the bills that are going to be in front of us. And we need direction from you and General Manager Pollock to give us the ability and flexibility to meet with other transit advocates when these issues pop up and be able to advocate appropriately. And so I'll wait for direction from the board tonight, and then we'll be willing to advocate and work on this issue.
Awesome, thank you.
Other questions? Okay.
Okay, we can go to the next slide, I think. So there are some other bills of interest that I wanted to make sure that the board at least is aware of, and we're going to be tracking and monitoring all of these. None of the ones up on this list right now have a public hearing yet. So as I mentioned, session just started pretty much a week and a half ago. And so we're really still in the period of a lot of informational hearings, and then we're starting to see agendas with quite a few public hearings. But none of the bills as of a couple hours ago have been listed for a public hearing yet. And so we still have time to monitor, look into background on most of these pieces of legislation, and act if needed. House Bill 2007, first of all, miscellaneous ODOT transportation placeholder funding bills. We had over 400 study bills and placeholder bills in this stack, which is a huge amount. Those are traditionally bills that have broad relating to clauses, or relating to clauses that are broad enough to enter gut and stuff all sorts of concepts, whether it's budget or policy. So we track all of those detailing or impacting Department of Transportation, speed bump issues, transportation, ODOT in general. We track all those so that later in session, we were able to see if any amendments come through or budget issues come through that we need to track that are important to transit. House Bill 2007, this is allowing public entities to restrict firearms in a public building. So you can imagine that can possibly be a fairly controversial subject. House Bill 2613, this is a DEQ, zero emission vehicle fund that we're going to be monitoring. This is $30 million of general fund, which, as we know right now, or we believe right now, we will be entering into a mild recession over the next 2 years from a state budgetary standpoint. So $30 million of general fund is going to be hard to come by in general, but it's something we're going to monitor very closely. 2720, e-vehicle and hydrogen fuel grant program. The last two I want, probably going to spend the bulk of our time talking about. Senate Bill 187 repeals the provision prohibiting transit workers from striking. This is an ATU bill and has been brought forward a couple times over the last 15 years, 20 years, I would say. Ever since, I think in 2007, there was legislation prohibiting transit workers from striking, similar to police officers and some fire officers as well. So that is one that is going to be of heavy discussion this year around transit. We're monitoring that very closely. Senate Bill 787, this is one that is introduced by Senator Floyd Przansky from the Eugene-Springfield area, and this expands the crime of assault in the third degree to include assault of a transit operator. There are some nuances in the current law around transit operators and when they are assaulted that this bill seeks to clear up. And it was actually a component of a conversation a couple days ago. Transit providers, including Cherriots and General Manager Pollock represented you on this panel. Transit providers were invited to the Joint Committee of Transportation to discuss public safety on transit. TriMet, Lane Transit, Rogue Valley, and Cherriots all came forward and discussed the unique challenges you and your operators, your staff, your riders are facing, and then what each transit district is trying to accomplish to create a more inviting and safe environment for individuals to use for transit. That was a substantial night of hearing. General Manager Pollock did a great job describing exactly what Cherriots does. So Senate Bill 787 is a component of this, transit safety, transit worker safety. Very important discussion this year. And then the last one is an LC, or legislative concept. It hasn't been introduced yet, but it's one we're tracking around confidential peer counseling for bus operators. Again, a component for your workers to make sure that they're taken care of as best as we can. So those are just some of the bills that we are tracking right now, along with several other transit entities. The OTA, the Oregon Transit Association, we work with very closely with their lobbyists and their representatives to track these issues and to advocate when needed. So, any other questions on pieces of legislation? All right. Well, I'm going to turn over the next slide to Waylon, talk about new legislators, governor, and whatnot.
Thanks, Dale. And can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Thanks for having us here tonight. We do have new faces and some new folks in the legislature and as well as the governor's office. So as you all know, Governor Kotek, Tina Kotek, has relinquished her role as speaker. She was the speaker of the House of Representatives from 2013 until 2022. So she had quite a long tenure, and now she serves as our governor. We also have Speaker Dan Rayfield from Corvallis, a Democrat. This will be his first long session as speaker. So this is sort of the proving years for him. President Courtney from Salem, as you all know, a legacy in Salem, is now retired, and the newly elected Senate President Rob Wagner has taken the helm, and so this will be his first long session as well as Senate President. We also have Senator Tim Knope and Representative Vicki Brees Iverson also doing their first long sessions in their minority leadership positions. So a little bit of untested territory here as we see how all of those different personalities interact with one another in the building, how they roll out their agendas, and eventually get all the way to sine die and hopefully pass budget. As Dale articulated earlier, we have 38 new legislators since 2020, so we are dealing with quite a few new faces and that requires us to do quite a bit of extra education and legwork to make sure everybody's well apprised of our issues. Some of those new faces include Representative Tom Anderson, Democrat, who now represents House District 19. Many of you probably have interacted with Tom Anderson as a former Salem City Councilor for 8 years. Representative Kevin Mannix, he's a Republican lawmaker who previously served in the legislature during the 1990s, and now he's back to represent House District 21, that northern Salem, Kaiser area. We also have Representative Tracy Kramer, who's a Republican. She won election for House District 22, and that extends from North Salem all the way up to Woodburn. And amongst the turnover, we also do have some returning faces. We have Representative Paul Evans, who used to represent House District 20. Again, that's South Salem, West Salem, Monmouth Independence. Senator Kim Thatcher now represents Peter Courtney's old district. And Senator Deb Patterson continues to represent Senate District 10, which includes a large portion of Salem, as Dale mentioned earlier. So I'll just reiterate that we are going to continue to work with, I guess Dale called them our diamonds in the rough, some of those folks that have been around, while working extra hard to make sure that we introduce all the new lawmakers to your agenda and to get them informed on important items like the STIF funding and protecting that.
And the other thing I'll mention is that we have, thank you, Waylon, General Manager Pollock and myself and Waylon and our team have some meetings over the next couple weeks to meet with many of these individuals. And a vast majority of the legislators who represent the service area of Cherriots, we've already met with repeatedly during the interim. And that education continues. I mean, it's not just meeting once with an individual, it's meeting multiple times, reiterating and repetition of information in order to educate them about the services being provided. And in addition, sometime this session, I think Cherriots and the other transit providers are going to be coming to the legislature to educate them as a whole on the use or how we've utilized those STIF dollars, those transit investment dollars, the dedicated funding source we got in 2017. Because out of all of the components of 2017, I think it's universally accepted that transit is a bright spot. It's been fully implemented, it's successful, and it has shown extreme value to individuals up and down the state. So that's something that we're looking forward to presenting in front of the Joint Committee on Transportation with our transit allies. I think the last slide is just a thank you slide for inviting us to come and provide comments. We're here for any questions you have. And again, just thank you very much for allowing us to represent you in the building.
Thank you very much for this briefing. Are there any questions for either Waylon or Dale? Okay. Seeing no questions, Director Navarro, would you like to maybe make an amendment to the state legislative agenda we're looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to, let's see, where are we at with the priorities? So I'd like to make an amendment to include commuter rail as one of the priorities for the items that we will be keeping a close eye on.
Could I give you a friendly amendment?
Absolutely.
That we would be supportive of the study of extending West commuter train from Wilsonville to Salem. Is that all right?
That sounds accurate.
Okay. All right. So I would assume that would be I guess I'm deferring to maybe Dale, Waylon, or Alan on what priority ranking you would suggest for supporting that, given that it's a new addition.
I mean, I would probably recommend priority level 2.
Okay.
Or priority level 3, one
Yeah.
of those two.
But we will communicate to the City of Wilsonville that you took a position of support.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. 3 makes sense to me, but maybe that changes. I'd love to see this bill have legs, but something like this has been attempted many times before. So.
And President Davidson, I'm happy to make those changes to the agenda. It is a study that also has a $500,000 price tag, so that during a session can sometimes be a very challenging issue to overcome.
Yeah, and I guess I'd like to make a note maybe on the record that I believe the bill asked for participation of both ODOT and TriMet in a study. And I think, just speaking as an individual, I think ODOT is best suited for that, because if such a service was to occur, I don't think TriMet is interested in, and I don't think they're best suited for being in the business of running transit all the way up and down the valley. So I think ODOT is the best for that. And so if in discussions that comes up, yeah, I'll just, yeah. Okay, so we have our federal legislative agenda and then our newly changed state legislative agenda before us. Would someone like to make a motion?
Are we discussing just, I'm sorry, excuse me, President Davis, are we discussing just the change, the proposed change, or the entire package at this point?
If you would like to modify the motion to incorporate the change, because we don't actually have a motion before us, so there doesn't need to be an amendment.
And then we'll go into discussion after
Yeah,
the motion.
exactly.
Thank you.
He's going to wait for discussion to provide comment.
Yeah. Would someone,
Second.
you know what, I'll make the motion. I move that the board adopts the 2023 federal and state I move that the board adopts the 2023 federal legislative agenda as shown in attachment A, and then the state legislative agenda as shown in attachment B, however, with the addition of a priority 3 level support for House Bill 2662. So, with that motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. And any discussion?
Yes, and maybe this isn't the right time, but, you know, I know that this has been something that's, speaking to the commuter rail extension at this point. This has been kicking around for a long time, and this says there were multiple unsuccessful attempts at doing a similar thing, and I remember that, but I also remember at some point that something was successful, and they did have a study, and I was pretty unimpressed with the results of that study, and I just want to make sure that we're not just repeating, you know, the same old on that, which is status quo forces talking it down and not really thinking outside the box a little bit on that, which I know is hard for railroaders, but I just have some concerns on the technical side of that, and to the extent that we have the ability to have our staff plugged into that, or have some of our board members on a task force, or however it works out, I don't know, maybe as soon as it's a technical thing, I don't necessarily have the same confidence you do in ODOT to make that happen, but these might be just personal problems that I have. So, but I'm on board with supporting the bill. Thank you.
So in the language of the bill, it does state that whoever, the consultants and the responsible parties would consult with the affected cities and the affected transit agencies. So we will have some opportunity to be a part of the discussions.
I'll also note here that I think the correct entity for this is an entity that presently doesn't exist. I think the challenge of commuter rail is one of governance principally, not revenue, and that there needs to be a transit district that spans the length of the Willamette Valley. And given the many blessings that Oregon is blessed with, including our robust land use laws, it is baffling to me that such an agency does not already exist, because we are perfectly situated for a entity that connects these disparate islands of urban areas. But for the time being, given the limitations of this bill, and I would love to see a bill creating a separate agency, but until then, I'm generally supportive of an effort like this. So, other discussion? Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of supporting the federal and state legislative agendas as we've discussed, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Dale, Whalen, and Kirby, if you're asleep, thank you for staying with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, our next item is an authorization to execute a 3-year contract.
I'll ask our risk administrator, Deborah Grant, to present the staff report.
Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board. I'm here to discuss and recommend the contract award to Brown & Brown Northwest as our broker for the next 3 years with an option to extend 4 additional one-year terms for a total of 7 years. If the full 7 years is awarded, the contract price would be $213,240. Brown & Brown has been our broker for a number of years. They will continue to provide the brokerage services that we utilize. Examples of some of their services that they provide are listed in the report. They are vital to assist us in the reviewing of insurance documents and securing insurance through the market. They also assist in reviewing our business practices and consulting on risk issues as they're presented. They provide a number of other services, including loss prevention services and loss analysis services, so to aid the district in making decisions as related to risk exposures. We did go through a request for proposal earlier or late fall, and we had a total of 2 brokerage firms responded to the request for proposal. After a careful review of their submittals, Brown & Brown was found to be the most responsive and most closely aligned to the services that we need. So with that, I am available for questions, should you have any regarding this.
Thank you for that report. Are there any questions? Okay, I think no questions. In which case, would someone like to make a motion? Please.
I move that the board authorize the general manager to execute a 3-year contract with 4 one-year renewal options with Brown & Brown Northwest to provide business insurance brokerage services for a total cost not to exceed $213,240.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Seems affordable. Am I wrong? I mean, it's a lot of money, but
Well, just to be clear, this isn't for the insurance. This is,
this is for the service.
No, this is for the brokerage services to procure the insurance.
Thank you, Director.
Typically, brokers will have commissions that they receive that is embedded in the premiums. In this instance, Brown & Brown does not receive any commissions beyond what is contained within this agreement.
Yeah, I really appreciate that method. I think fee-for-service, for generally speaking, for all financial matters, is the way to go, because otherwise there's some perverse incentives at play, even with somebody who is a fiduciary. Right? So I appreciate a fee-for-service model. Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing no opposition, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and proceed to general manager reports.
Great, thank you. I do have a few items. So in front of you, Staff Director Feeney provided you some information talking points for the month. One of those items includes the National Human Trafficking Awareness Month is January, and I just want to direct your attention to a flyer you also have that Cherriots, in partnership with the Center of Hope and Safety and United Way, is hosting a Human Trafficking Awareness Month workshop right here in this hearing room on January 31st from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. If your schedule allows, I'd encourage you to come and participate. In addition to that, you also have received information about the upcoming Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments annual meeting and dinner next month, and we'll be following up with you for attendance at that meeting so we can get you registered. Dale Patton talked earlier about the Joint Commission transportation testimony, and it's a great opportunity for the 4 leading transit districts to get in front of that committee so early in the session to start building that relationship, because there are several new members on there, to include Representative Mannix. So that went well, and we are on our way. I also wanted to share with you, as you recall, as part of the strategic plan, several of the tactics included conducting rider surveys and community member surveys to establish baseline targets for our work. We completed those surveys in November and early December. And yesterday, the executive leadership team received a briefing from TransPro, who conducted those surveys, received a draft preliminary presentation and findings. We will be finalizing those and presenting it to the board at next month's meeting. So I look forward to sharing the results with you there. And in March, we're also planning to bring to the board kind of a 6-month briefing on the Zero Fare program, kind of what's working and how we're doing. So look forward to that ahead of time. My intention was to do this earlier, but with back-to-back executive session, work session, and board meeting, I didn't properly introduce our new executive assistant, Kara Pressey, to the board. She's been on board about a month and has been doing a great job in mastering the role. So please take time to welcome her. Some of you have seen her via virtual meeting, but we're happy to have her as part of the team. And that concludes my report.
All right. Thank you very much, General Manager Pollack. I'll ask Director Navarro to commence or begin the board committee reports.
Thank you, President Davidson. So a lot happening in Kaiser. It's been fairly busy this month. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the Kaiser Chambers Government Affairs Committee or the First Citizens Banquet, but I was able to attend the monthly Coffee with Kathy meetings that we have, which was super awesome. We had a presenter, Meredith Mooney from Kaiser United, who's there, and she got to share what her organization does, and really expressed how appreciative she is for Cherriots and some of the bus passes that we're able to provide to her, that she's able to give out to the community. So that was great hearing that, and with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Director Carney.
Thank you, President Davidson. Well, earlier this week, we had our SCATS meeting, the Salem Kaiser Area Transportation Study Policy Committee meeting. It was a pretty full agenda. I won't belabor too many of the items on it because there's one in particular that I think it could be of interest to our board members and maybe other folks listening. We elected a chair and vice chair, some transportation improvement project updates. We reviewed Chapter 7 of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, titled Proposed System. We are getting ready to begin the job of updating our Unified Planning Work Program. That'll come back to the group next month. That's a little bit more actionable than something kind of large scale like the MTP. So a little bit more interesting there. 2 helpful pedestrian updates on work that's going to move forward. One is Pringle Path. So Riverfront Park, you know where the ball is, the globe. There's going to be a path that goes up the Pringle Creek and connects to the other, like, sort of Pringle Creek pedestrian path. So that's great to have that part of our trail system connected. And then there's also a Highway 22 pedestrian overpass that's going to give people access to, I'm blanking on the name of the elementary school down there, but it's Counselor Phillips District in South Salem. So that's exciting. But what I wanted to get to is they are standing up, that is the Mid-Willamette Valley COG, and I guess through SCATS, or maybe it's just the COG in general, but it's a steering committee that is going to create the Transportation Safety Action Plan. So they're looking for one or more policy committee members, and I expressed my interest kind of pending when the meetings might be. It doesn't look like a huge obligation, but also the school district they're hoping to have represented, community members, Salem Health, Kaiser Traffic Safety Bike Ped Committee, some public safety officials, police and sheriff, city council or planning commission, I assume for both Salem and Kaiser, and then somebody from the ODOT crash unit. But I think what we have seen on the policy committee is that encouraging and helping the policy committee to consider safety in a new and different way helps us value vulnerable users in our system in a way that I think better represents reality. So prior to this, they were using just ODOT crash data, which has no mechanism, as I've discussed with this group before, no mechanism and indeed no tool to capture pedestrian or bicycle incidents. And so there's a dramatic undercount. And so I think this is a good opportunity. So I'm gonna try to be involved in that work. And if there's other folks that are interested, I believe there is space. I would reach out to the COG and let them know. And then otherwise, we had our legislative subcommittee meeting earlier this month, and I'm happy to be working with CFM and happy to have people back in the building. Let folks know that related to kind of local stuff going on, two things. One, earlier this week, and we discussed this at the SCATS meeting, the Salem City Council adopted a Vision Zero. Is it policy or a
I think goal is what they're calling it.
goal? So for those unfamiliar with Vision Zero, it's kind of an unattainable, unreachable goal, but the idea is that
Well, hold on.
oh,
It is totally attainable. Jersey City had no deaths last year.
is that for real?
200,000 people live in Jersey City, so yeah.
Wow. Okay, take it back. So, within reach, but a lofty goal indeed.
Yes.
To have no injuries or fatalities related to transportation incidents within your metropolitan planning area or your city in this case. So that's exciting, and kind of related in related transportation news for the city of Salem, they have their upcoming parking open house, which is the first step in their climate-friendly and equitable communities work. Is it the 30th, the day before this, or the same day? I have it on my work calendar as well. Okay, I can get it open. But 4:30 to 6:30, and I would encourage folks to attend and speak up about what, yeah, so it's the same.
31st.
It's the 31st, yeah. So this is, yeah. Back to back. So nice little walk between one to the other, and then you can get it all done. And then finally, I just wanted to note, with all this IIJA funding coming in, and all this focus that we have on housing, for example, like I think Governor Kotek set a goal for 36,000 new housing units every year. I'm thinking about all this transportation infrastructure, all these buses, all these shelters, all these houses that we need to build, and I'm thinking about who is going to do the work. And like vis-a-vis our recent labor negotiations with the union, as we are watching kind of the premium for talent and labor increase, as we see increased pressure on this, pretty big void in our workforce right now, how do we think about that long term? Like, how do we, like, there's a lot of job creation happening right now, but I don't know that there's a lot of training and direction on the labor force building side. And I just don't know how we think about that as a community, as a board. You know, it just seems to me that there is a gap looming, and it's something worth paying attention to. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Carney. I'm up next. So I would like to echo what General Manager Pollack said earlier, which is that the COG, so the Council of Governments annual dinner and annual meeting is next month, February 15th. If you could let the board clerk, Kira Pressey, know that you would like to attend, she can get you registered. I will be in attendance. Looking forward to it. It's out in Newburgh. If you've ever been to the Chehalem Center there, it's maybe a new location for you to attend. So earlier this month, I attended our local Strong Towns monthly meeting, and they invited me to talk about the long-range transit plan and a couple other items. Very interested and engaged group. They had lots of great questions, and I just wanted to relay one question and my answer to you all. And the question was about my priority for the upcoming Salem Transportation System Plan update. And I answered that one of my priorities, or one of the things that I would like to see from the city, is a top-down focus on road safety. And because right now, by my own count, and I'm saying my own count because right now the city of Salem does not track traffic fatalities within their jurisdiction. The same goes for most other local governments. But by my count, there were 17 road deaths in Salem. And to give you a little bit of perspective, that is double the amount of individuals killed by homicide in the city of Salem. So there were 6 who were killed what would be classified as homicide last year. And then to give a other perspective, this is a figure that came from a recent Statesman Journal report, which is that 16 individuals were killed in recreational boating incidents, but that was for the whole state of Oregon. And so 17 for the city of Salem versus, and of course, recreational boating is not the same as being a pedestrian or a cyclist or even being in a car. And so I was very excited to see the Vision Zero goal being passed by council. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to require a complete rethinking of how we address road infrastructure and road usage. And so I'm excited that the council is being mindful of that. I would be remiss if I didn't say that one of those 17 road deaths was actually the clerk of the board for the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments just last month. She was walking 2 blocks south of our very own transit center from this building, and she did everything right. And she was in the crosswalk. She had the go-ahead, and yet she was struck and killed by a driver in a 2-ton steel vehicle, and as a result, she is dead. And she is just one of many people that die every year by cars, because we have prioritized cars and car travel and speed, even marginal speed increases above all else. On a street that I navigate frequently, which is State Street, that road is specifically designed to highway speeds, and as a result, 2 weeks prior to Denise's death, there was a woman that was killed, but this time she was in a vehicle. And it's because speeding is designed for that street. And so while it's posted at 45 miles an hour, individuals regularly go 60 plus miles an hour on a street in the middle of a city. And it should be no surprise, though it should be shocking to us, that this continues to happen, and that more importantly and more significantly, that we continue to let this happen. And so those things are on my mind, and I'm excited to partner with the city of Salem, the city of Kaiser, Marion County, Polk County, and other jurisdictions that are interested in reducing the amount of death that occurs on our public right-of-way. So with that, that concludes my report, and I'd invite Director Duncan to provide hers.
Thank you, President Davidson. I got COVID this month. I've been a COVID dodger super dodger up until now, but it happened, so I did not go to all of my regular events. Thankfully, though, I was able to go to South Salem Connect before I got sick. For those of you that are not familiar, Salem Leadership Foundation conducts regular meetings within more or less groupings throughout Salem, and one of which is South Salem Connect group. I was able to go and we heard a presentation on a new community garden that they're looking to raise funds for, as well as connect with some of the schools. We had the New Zero Fair for students applauded. I was not the only one that was there. There was also a representative for Cherriots there, which was fantastic. I go in part for my day job and in part for Cherriots. It's nice when I'm able to pull double duty and wear both hats a little bit. But it was fantastic to hear some of the projects the community is working on. They will be presenting on the funding received from the omnibus package for the South Salem Transit Center at the next meeting next month. So if you're interested in attending and hearing that presentation and getting some more facts in the community and hearing exactly how that will affect members of South Salem and some influential and interested parties, that would be great. It's a good way to kind of get all the neighborhood association representatives at the same time, usually somebody from each there. And we also have representatives from the unhoused community. The Church of the Park sends a representative as well, and they come and hear about different things that are going on. So overall, just a really good review of what's happening in South Salem, and there's a lot of good stuff. It was very uplifting, something I really needed this month, especially with some of the crazy things that have been happening in the news. It was really nice to have a moment with the community, watching everybody come together and talk about how to get funds together for a new community garden and looking forward to a new transit center in South Salem. So it was really nice, and I wanted to leave you with that uplifting note.
Thank you, Director Duncan. Director Holmstrom.
Thank you, President Davidson. I don't have a report to make this month. Haven't yet been assigned to any committees. I do have a request of staff, and that's my understanding is that staff is working on updated travel policies for both for staff and as well as for the board. Those would be separate policies. I'd just like to request that staff bring or have a work session with the board on those updated travel policies at the soonest opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. With that, that concludes the business items for this evening, and we are adjourned.